You are listening to Within Tolerance, a podcast for machinists by a machinist. I'm your host, Dylan Jackson from Protea Machining, and this week I am so happy to welcome back Easton from Moria Manufacturing. What's going on, Easton?
Not too much. It's just getting done with making some parts all day.
Yeah, totally understand. So yeah, we were talking, I think, last week and realized that it has been a year and a half since your last time on the podcast. I think you had just gotten the new knock. And so much has changed that we got to talk about it. So give us all the update, everything that's gone on since then. Because I think you even expanded your facility. I think the Duramax was after that as well. Employees, all that stuff. So, Gregory from the Patreon said he hasn't heard anything about you in a while. He assumes you're just busy making parts. Elaborate, mofos. So get on it, man. What's been going on?
Yeah, I did go back and briefly skim through the last episode just to kind of figure out what I had talked about last time. So we did just get the knock before the last episode. There was we already had the Duramax. I had one employee at the time. I have since hired, 3 employees, I think? 4. I had an intern over the summer. I had,
was Matt 1 working there at that point? I can't remember.
Yes.
Okay.
I hired Matt 1.0 in 2022, right before IMTS.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, because I met him at IMTS. That makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I had 1 employee. I had just gotten a second Nakamura. That was the year of just buying crazy amounts of machines because we had bought the Speedio, we bought the Duramax, and then we bought the SC300. So that brings us to beginning of last year. We were still making a bunch of parts. And then I had been helping out with the local Rocket Club. And one of the kids in the Rocket Club had kind of shown some interest in working in a manufacturing kind of job instead of going to college, and he wasn't really sure what he wanted to do. And so he had asked me if I would be interested in hiring him. And so I had kind of worked through figuring out if I wanted to hire a more experienced machinist. I had interviewed Ethan Batain late December-ish of 2023.
Right.
And we were kind of talking about maybe having him come on. He ended up deciding to go with a different company, and we kind of were trying to decide after that, do we go for another person like Ethan, very experienced, or do I go more of the kind of bring people on who don't have a lot of experience? And so,
right. Yeah, that was actually Ethan's question on the Patreon was, what led you to start that route of new employees that are completely green that you have to train and give us the benefits and the pitfalls.
Yeah, it was a definitely a gamble kind of situation where I was trying to figure out which way to go, and I figured trying to hire at least one non-experienced person was worth a try at least. So that's where I ended up hiring my second employee, and so he started right out of high school after the school year. So it was June 2024. He came on right away, and basically we started kind of trying to figure out how to train somebody who has no idea how to do any machining. And I can get into a little bit more of that a little bit later. But basically we hired Dragos and then hired my friend from high school as an engineer for the summer, hired an intern for the summer, and then from there, we ended up getting an applicant, actually, who is our most recent employee, which is Matt 2.0. So we have 2 Matts now, which is a little bit confusing some days, but it generally actually isn't as bad as it sounds.
Yeah. It felt like overnight in talking to you, you went from, you and Matt 1.0 to a crew of people.
Yeah, it was definitely the big push of 2024 was just hiring people and realizing that was both the best decision I could possibly make and the worst decision I could possibly make, simultaneously.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, let's talk about the struggles and the things you've learned. You've now onboarded or in the middle of onboarding to green machinists. What lessons learned can you pass along to everybody? Because I think that this decision, I think, weighs on a lot of us. Me especially, like I want to hire green people, I think, but I do, I see in talking with you, there are some big pitfalls as well, some expensive pitfalls, I guess I should say.
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting ball game because it's crazy to think of like what you have to teach them that you like don't even think about anymore. There's just like basic hand skills and things that like some of them are really easy to teach, like teaching how to use a micrometer, pair of calipers. That went fairly fast, and we tried to kind of keep at least with Dragosh, we like kind of kept him right in the QC side of things pretty early on, just like measuring parts and like filling out inspection reports and things. I think like a few weeks in, I had him fill out like 10 or 15 AS 9102, like Form 3 or whatever, the full inspection reports. So he just like sat there and measured parts for like 3 days straight.
Oh man.
So it was pretty easy getting to that point. And I think that was like sort of a false flag of like, oh, this will be not that bad kind of thing. And started kind of, at least the way I looked at it was, I figured teaching programming is going to be the most difficult. But in order to program, you need to have a good answer of like what goes on in terms of setting up a machine. And so I started out just having Dragosh kind of follow Matt and I around, or Matt 1.0 and I around, and just doing our setups for us. So like we would program and then he would touch off our tools or set up our holders or things like that. Because like if you think about it, somebody coming fresh out of high school, they've never seen an ER collet before, let alone like a BT30 holder or something. So like you can't just have them go run off on their own and do tool setup. So
Right.
like we kind of just immediately had him doing basic tasks where we were like just doing setups and like probing in parts and things like that. So like that was kind of what we started with him on, and just like having him saw cut and deburr material and things like that. So just kind of all the setup stuff to get like going. And then we would kind of take over and do the parts, and then eventually started having him run parts. I think a lot of people would probably jump into having him run parts first. And my worry with that is that like, it's the same things you think about when you're talking about like automation, because at that point, your employee's basically just a robot. They do exactly what you tell them to do, sometimes not even that. And they
No more,
have
no
no
less.
idea what they don't.
You forget
Yeah.
to tell them to blow off the jaws or something, and all of a sudden all your parts have chips in them or something like that.
Yeah, and we had like a little bit of that at the beginning, but I think what helped is we really hammered home like cleaning the vise out and putting parallels in and things like that at the very beginning before Dragosh was running parts. And I think that was like a really big step in the right direction. But it was like still things that like then when we started having him run parts, I still didn't comprehend some of the problems. There was actually I think it was maybe just one day, but my girlfriend was actually getting a like minor procedure done. So I took the day off and was like, you guys got this. You guys just have to run these parts. It's not going to be like anything, like no programming, anything like that. So it was Matt 1.0, which obviously is a very seasoned machinist, probably more than I am. And he was going to be kind of in charge. And then I had my intern and engineer were working on shop improvement projects kind of thing. And then Dragosh was supposed to also just kind of help run parts. And I get a call like mid-afternoon while I'm at the hospital. It's like, hey, I think we just blew up the spindle in the Speedio. I was like, oh my God. It's like the worst call you can possibly get,
Yeah.
which is what ended up happening. And it's a totally understandable mistake. And it's like, it's something that I could totally see happening if you don't know better. And it's comes down to kind of a basic hand skill, which is Dragosh had partially tightened the vise to probe in a piece of like an op2 part, I think. but did not torque the vise to a spec because he didn't know what spec to torque it to. And then went to lunch. Matt thought Dragos had tightened the vise fully. The probing was done, so just hit cycle start. And the like big Daishowa FCR comes in to try and remove the top hat and just sucks the part right out of the vise.
Yeah.
It actually ended up not killing the spindle, which is kind of miraculous. It like had dented a tiny bit of the taper, and I just went in there with a stone and stoned it out, and we haven't had to go get a new spindle yet, but there was definitely like a couple hours there where I was like, I want to just fire all my employees.
Right.
But like the reality of that is that's super short-sighted, and for every mistake they make 10 good parts. So it's like, it's a balance of like understanding that like they don't know everything that I know. And it's really hard to get them to that point. And there is going to be just like some hand holding. And so.
Is there anything you've learned about ways to document this stuff, especially working with such young employees? I think, I've had a lot of people on here and gotten a lot of questions of like, how do I teach Gen Z or whatever, how to do this? And like, how do I speak to them? So like, is there anything specific that you've noticed about how to document things or approach them when you're teaching them stuff?
I think I like initially really screwed up on that. I kind of went into it assuming that just like giving them instructions and demonstrations was going to be a good way of getting them going. And I think we initially tried also, like I had Frogos bring in a notebook and like write down everything I tell you. And what I realized is they don't go look at their notebook at all. They don't look at pictures in their phone. They just seem to like basically need to be taught it. At least and I can't generalize this to anybody. I am just generalizing this to like my staff, is they just need to do it like 5 times before they'll get it.
Okay. And then Matt 2.0 came to you with some knowledge, right? He went to the same trade school you went to. Is that right?
Yeah. So the trade school I went to is literally like 5 minutes from my shop door. And I had reached out to them actually about a year prior and said like, hey, do you guys have any students that are looking for a job? I'd love to hire somebody. And I got basically a response from one of my instructors. And the instructor was like, nope, none of the students are looking for a job. They are all either in a job or not looking for one. I was like, well, cool. Thanks. I'm glad that you guys have all your students working at places.
Right.
And like, I think part of that was like, I knew right in the moment that was such bullshit.
Right. Yeah.
There's like 30 or 40 kids. There's no way every single one of them has a shop that they're working at already.
Yeah.
And I think the funny thing is I've since talked to Matt about that. And he's like, yeah, no, that's bullshit. Like there were definitely kids that needed jobs.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I just got like a website contact form that was like, hey, I'm looking for a job in the area and I found your website. Like, would you be open to hiring me? And so I brought him in for an interview. Seemed to have a good work ethic and everything. I'm not really super experienced in like giving interviews. So my interview was basically just me walking him around the shop and just chatting for a little bit about his interests and like what he was into and what he's looking for and like his prior experience. And a couple things stood out. He had run multi-axis lathes. He'd run horizontals. He'd worked at like a large shop out over in Milwaukee making like valves and things. So he had been some experience with that. And then the other big thing that stood out to me was that he had like a personal passion for machining kind of thing, in the sense that like he was interested in firearms. And so he's excited about learning machining for the purpose of making firearms in the future kind of thing.
Right.
Things like that. So
yeah, it sounds like when you're hiring someone that green, or like when you're, or in that range of green, either fresh out of high school or in trade school, the first interview is kind of more of a vibe check than it is like a, what do you know anyway? So you're like, I'm gonna have to reteach you most of this or teach you the right way to do it anyway.
Yeah, and I think that was too with Dragos. Like I had known him for about a year prior to hiring him because he was one of my Rocket Club kids, and he was kind of a good leader in the club. Like he was always working on personal projects in the club. He was always helping other kids, and like I obviously liked all of that, and I saw that he had good work ethic, and I saw that he had like an attention to detail, which is one thing that is really hard to teach is attention to detail. And as much as I'm going to be griping about my employees throughout this entire episode, like at the end of the day, I love all of them, and there's a reason they're still all employed here.
Right.
And the one thing that they all have, which I couldn't not find, like I can find, but I can't like teach, is they all have incredible attention to detail. It's actually, I'm at a point right now where I'm trying to figure out how to get them to not have such an attention to detail. Where an example today was like, Dragos comes to me with a part that had like a microscopic scratch that like probably came from like a piece of paper towel. He was like, "Can you see that? Should I ship this? Like, should we put this in the box?" It's like, yes, just put it in the box. Like it's going to anodize. It'll be fine.
Right. Still, like you said, much better to have that than the opposite of like, oh, I missed this giant gouge when it went to anodize. Whoops. Like that's the stuff that sucks.
Yeah, that's like really hard to teach. And like that's something that you don't want happening. You want them like I was like right at the beginning, I have them picking up parts and I was like, if you can't run your fingers across every edge of this part, it's not good enough to ship. Like if you get cut by anything on this part, then it's not a good part.
Totally. Yeah. Well, Tuck's Garage asked, how has the new knock been since you got it? Any issues you could report or make better? So let's get into machines since you last got them. Like you said, the new Speedio, the Duramax, the knock. Give us the update on all that.
Yeah. Let's see. We've got the new Speedio since I've been on has been awesome. It's the 28 tool D00 machine. It's not my favorite machine to run in the shop just because I'm not a huge fan of the D00. I find it like, I actually timed it out. I'm being nitpicky, but it's like half a second slower on the control than the C00. And so like I can move through menus like 2 times faster on the older Speedio than I can on the new Speedio. And so like it pisses me off with my ADHD having to like wait for a folder to open, even though it seems like it's like 10 seconds, but it's actually like less than a second. So like I'm honestly nitpicking. But my older Matt 1.0 loves that machine. And so that's generally just his machine. I just kind of leave it alone and let him use that.
Well, because he's got one at home. Is his also a D0?
Yeah, his
okay.
He's got a S500 XD1 at home.
Okay,
so
that makes sense then that he's attached to it.
Yeah, he moves through quickly. It's funny watching him sometimes stumble through the door interlock because I think he removed it at home, and we definitely don't have it removed at work. So he'll like try and do something with the door open and be like, I'll see him like have this like blank look on his face for like 2 seconds, and then he'll be like, oh, and then he'll like close the door and then do it.
Right. That's funny.
So we've got the knock. We've had the Duramax now for 2 years at least. I think I'd have to look, but yeah, I think 2 years on the Duramax, and the Duramax has been great. It's been a really big game changer. We don't use it really every day, I don't actually think, but we do use it. We maybe use it every day. I'd have to kind of think about how much we actually use the Duramax, but what we do use it for needs to be done on a CMM. So like we have the ability to check parts, especially when we're doing some of these parts where there's a fair or something where we have to do like a bunch of serialized inspection. We can just set up a program and a fixture and just let it run.
Right.
And I think that's been more than worth the cost of the CMM. I'm starting to kind of get my 2 younger employees on the CMM, and they're kind of grasping it finally kind of thing. And so I'm thinking about maybe sending them to go get the official training at some point.
Oh, sweet.
Just because there's stuff that like they can probably learn better in the class than they can learn from me. And it would be just nice to send them to do that. But they're they're really getting into at least using it as a manual CMM.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't think either of them are quite at the programming point, but like I'll see them walk over, drop a part down, open up a new program and just like check a bore or like check a flatness of a part or something.
Okay.
And so like that's already a big win kind of thing in the sense of that, like I just don't have to deal with that. That's been like the biggest problem and things that, and I guess solution is that my employees are helping me to deal with the stuff that I just can't deal with my timing kind of thing.
Right. Well, I mean, you've got quoting and, material ordering and all that other stuff on your plate as well that like, they might not even know that you're doing behind the scenes.
Yeah. I guess for the Nakamura, that machine has been a real game changer for us. And that's kind of obvious that a brand new 6-axis lathe is going to be a game changer, but it's really opened up a lot of opportunities and like is opening up more opportunities as we speak kind of thing. So that machine is definitely one of our most used machines. I think we still use the older Nakamura more just because my employees are a lot more comfortable setting that up. So they're going to gravitate towards turning that machine on and using it when it's time to make parts. And then I'm kind of the only one that like, I guess Matt 1.0 also programs and sets up the C300, but it's more of like kind of my machine, quote unquote. So I'm more of the user of that machine, but like it's hard to describe what you can do when you have an ability to like, we don't even need necessarily use the sub spindle every day, but the ability to have like 6 inches of Y travel, we can do pretty complicated milled parts in just like one setup on that machine.
Right. Well, I was
And
shocked. Like you kind of held my hand and walked me through making a part when I was there before IMTS, and with your template and stuff that Zap helped you set up, and the whole workflow that you've dialed in. I couldn't believe how easy it was. Like it was really, really impressive how quickly we went from some doohickey that I designed up to throwing it on the lathe and making chips.
yeah, I guess I totally glossed over that. Right after you and I recorded last, I think I had Chris Apatini come out and help us just like get rolling on that lathe. It was part of the original like purchase of the machine. I basically told methods that I wanted Chris to train me instead of their training. And they were a little bit butthurt about that, but like I think in the end they realized I like kind of got through to them and explained that like what I was trying to get was not like how to use a FANUC control or like how to use a lathe. Like we've already got one Nakamura. I've already know how to use sub spindle with Fusion. It was more just like dialing in the workflow for specifically that machine and live, just like digging through the post and figuring out what's going on with the post. And like, I don't know if even we fully finished the post while Chris was here, but like we had an idea of everything that needed to be done by the time he left.
Right.
But yeah, so we've got like a pretty sweet template for both of our Nakamuras, but we really have a dialed one for the newer Nak. And it like, I think part of what makes it special is what Chris helped us with, which is the ejection. He's using the Nakamura jump programming to basically check if the cycle starts with the sub spindle closed. That means that there is a part in there and that you need to eject the part into the parts catcher before you go and grab the next part.
Right.
And then if it starts with the collet open, it just skips over that entire section of code and just cleans and washes the sub collet out before it comes forward. And so like, that's something that's very difficult to do in a post processor, but is really easy to do with macros on the machine, and something I wouldn't have necessarily like jumped right into kind of thing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I know we did a sub transfer when I was there, and I mean, for me, it wasn't zero stress, but it was much less stressful than I've seen from other people. Like you weren't worried about it. You're like, it's gonna be fine. We'll be good. Like we threw collets in, you're like, it'll be fine.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of it too is we've got a very specific parting bleed setup that we know works. And we've done enough transfers at this point on that machine that like I am a lot less worried about it on that machine than I think an average person might be.
Right.
So that machine's been a game changer. I think I've told this to people. I haven't actually proved this, but I'm pretty sure that thing has more like torque and like milling ability than either of our Speedios. I've definitely taken like a 1/2 inch long necked end mill and just like started slotting. I think it was in like aluminum or Delrin, so it's maybe not quite as impressive, but like it's got some power behind it, and like it's a nice machine to be milling on. Like it runs any code we've thrown at it. Like I'll just throw like a 3D rotary parallel at it, and it'll just eat the code, do it. It's a modern CNC machine, so it better take that. But like, I'm glad our post works and everything like that for that.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I would not say with Fanuc that is a given all the time. Like depending on how the manufacturer spec'd out their control, I've seen modern Fanuc stuff that just like falls flat on its face with 3D stuff. But the knock seemed like it performed really, really well in 3D.
Yeah, I mean we use it for 3D stuff because like a lot of times I'm too lazy to put like a corner round end mill in there. So if there's a fillet, I'm just gonna surface it.
Right.
And so we get a lot of stuff like that, or just like deburring parts with a ball mill or things like that. A big upgrade we've gotten since is, and I need to order more of these, but they're crazy expensive, are Capto live tools. Because that's been a game changer too, where we can just like have a bunch of tools loaded offline and we just load them into our tool 12. So it'll be like tool 12, tool 1224, or 1236, sorry, is our first one.
Okay.
We just do, because we have a half index turret, so we do one full revolution of the turret if it's in the same tool position.
Makes sense.
But yeah, so we've got a Capto live tool. We've actually, quite frankly, that entire machine's basically all Capto at this point. Any future lathes we're going to be getting are going to be all Capto. We don't even necessarily use it for like its intended purpose. Like we'll have tools with offsets like saved. But like the ability to just like mid-cycle be like, is my insert shipped? Pull the tool holder out, bring it over to the bench, look at it under a microscope. Like, oh, nope, my insert's not shipped. Put it back in. And it repeats within, I think Sandvik says 2 microns.
Oh, wow. That's impressive.
You can just like take it out, put it back in and not touch off your tool again. And so like, I guess that's to us a bigger factor of like why we use it.
Yeah,
it's just convenience kind of thing.
So to the other side of his question, any issues or options you wish you had bought on that machine?
I think a couple things. One, I think I should have gotten the better conveyor. Looking down into the like crevices around the conveyor, I'm looking at it and waiting for the weather to get a little bit nicer here, because I'm going to have to pull that conveyor out and do a full clean out because it looks like there are chips getting past the conveyor. And I wonder if I should have just ponied up and gotten the like filter conveyor, especially with how much milling we do on that machine.
Right.
The finer chips kind of thing just get right past the hinge belt. Issues wise, I guess I've got 2 to report. One, we had some initial issues with where methods place the mist collector. And if you like think about the airflow pattern where you have to suck in clean air and then exhaust out the like smoky or mist air kind of thing. And they put the intake for the mist collector right above the sub spindle, like far end, all the way to the right.
Right.
And so it just basically never evacuated out the mist above the actual cutting area. So not only could you like not see when you were cutting, but when you opened the door, you would just get like blasted with mist and like smoke. So we went back and forth with methods for a while on that. And basically what they ended up coming up with was the exact thing we asked them to come up with at the beginning, which was there's like a video posted by Nakamura of their like WY series and their new mist collector that they sell. and they have like this duct running along the ceiling of the machine, like right above the cutting area. And so we like sent that video to Methods and we were like, this is what we want. Methods was like, cool. Well, we'll talk to engineering. We'll talk to Nakamura and we'll like all get together and come up with a solution. I was like, okay. And then they took a while and they came back and they said, we're going to build this duct that goes on the ceiling, right above the cutting area. And I was like, cool.
Yeah. I wonder where you saw that. Cool.
And so but in their credit, like they did it as a warranty and they came in and they put it in and it works great. So like, I'm glad that is finally done. But like, there was definitely a lot of times where we're just like drowning in mist in the shop because that thing was just producing so much.
Right. Yeah. That's rough.
The other major issue is we had a fire in it.
I was going to come to that because you've said smoke now and mist, and I wanted to kind of touch on your switch over. So yeah, let's get to that.
Yeah. So at the beginning of last year, we were running a job with these 4130 bushings in our older knob. And we were cutting them dry because we were finding that for whatever reason, still don't really have an explanation of why, when we cut the 4130 wet, the finish looked like it was cut with a butter knife. And the only change is turning off the coolant, not changing the insert, not changing the feeds and speeds. We got like a straight rainbow mirror. Not really sure why. Isgard didn't really have an explanation for it when we called them about it. So we were cutting these bushings dry, but they were threaded bushings. So we had to tap the ID, and we weren't going to do that dry. So we would kick on the high pressure coolant, drill a hole with a TSC drill, and then form tap it, and then kick it off, and then do all the turning. And what ended up happening, this is on our older machine that does not have a fire trace. I'm in my office and I just hear this like jet engine sound.
Oof.
And then Matt yelling fire. So I run out of my office and there's like 8-foot tall flames shooting out of the top of the lathe and out of the top of the mist collector.
Ooh.
Because basically what we surmise happened was the insert got dull and then dropped a like red hot glowing chip down into the pile of chips in the conveyor, which lit those on fire, which then lit all the mist remaining in the like cabin of the machine on fire. And so we put out the fire, I think, in under a minute, and that machine's actually totally fine. There was no damage to the machine. More importantly, no injury to anyone in the shop or any injury to the shop itself.
Right.
We didn't have a fire trace on that machine, but we always knew fire was a possibility when we were running high pressure oil. And so we had like 3 oil rated fire extinguishers just like sitting right around the machine. So we were able to both put out the fire very quickly and like nobody got hurt. I'm just very thankful nobody got hurt kind of thing. That would have been like one of the worst things that could ever be kind of thing.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So that happens and we start the process of cleaning out that machine. And like we're like, you know what? We're gonna clean this all out. We're gonna order a fire trace and we're gonna keep running oil. But like that was scary, but we made it 4 years without a single fire. We'll be fine. Like that was just a freak accident. I guess we learned our lesson. Don't cut dry ever.
Right.
And then literally within maybe a month, I'm on the SC300 roughing out like 4-inch diameter 17.4. I walk away from I like run my first part totally fine, walk away, and then I like walk back to check on the roughing and I see the entire door light up red or like bright orange, like a flash of light. And it took me like fraction of a second to process like, oh my God, it's on fire. And I sprint to the side of the machine to hit the like fire extinguisher release because there's like a manual release on the fire trace. And by the time I wrap around to the side, the fire trace like tripped, put itself out. And so again, no damage to that machine. Like there's literally Methods came in like a month or 2 ago to do some thing. I don't even remember what they were in for. Oh, I think it was just like a sales visit, but they brought somebody by. And I told them that they had a fire, or we had a fire in that machine. They were like, we can't even tell you had a fire in this machine.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
it
the
was,
fire's not, but the fact that,
and again, nobody got hurt on that one. And but that one put us out like a couple days, and we had to call the customer and be like, hey, we're going to be late on this job because we can't run our machine, because when that fire trace trips, it e-stops the machine and keeps it in an e-stopped state until you change the fire like trace extinguisher. And again, we have our dealer, I think, is Fire Stop Systems. They were out within like a day to replace it. And what was really like comforting when they came out to replace it was the guy like looks at where the hose burst, because it's like this like red line running along the ceiling. And he like looked at where the hose burst and he goes, this didn't burst fast enough. He's like, if you had placed this in, if the previous tech had put the like line in this configuration, it would have tripped a few seconds sooner. And I was like, that's cool that you guys like know how this works. And he like changed the line configuration. But I think that was like my final straw. I was like, all right, well, 2 fires in a row, that's now putting my employees at risk.
right.
And like, we were really benefiting from oil, and I'm still like a big fan of running oil. I think if we get a Swiss lathe, we'll still be running oil, but like, I think on larger machines where there's a bigger chance for like more heat to be generated, I think it's just not worth it. I mean, it's actually, let me retract that statement. It's fully worth it. Like we were able to hit surface finish requirements on parts that like would have been crazy difficult with coolant. And we could do, our tool life was basically infinite. But like, if that puts my employees at risk, I don't really care if I have to buy more inserts.
Yeah. Not only your employees, but also, puts jobs behind and your machines down. And I mean, those are obviously second to employee safety, but those are still very important business reasons to switch to coolant, I think.
Yeah, so we've fully switched. Every machine in the shop is now running coolant. It's a massive pain in the ass. We have to top up coolant every like seemingly 2 hours, but it's actually like a couple days, but it's still annoying when the SC300 has a 100-gallon coolant tank, and it takes a lot to like fill that back up. And that was one thing, like I said, we had an engineer, which was like a friend from high school, Riley. Riley did fantastic job over the summer of building all sorts of shop improvement projects. Like we've got a 300-gallon RO system that like is pressurized RO now. So it's full like faucet pressure, and it seemingly never is empty because it just self-fills with like full redundancy. He built all of that by himself. So that was like just awesome that he was truly a plug and play employee of just like, he wasn't doing any machining. So it was like, go deal with this. Like, he organized our gauge, like thread gauges. He organized our collets a little bit better and like 3D printed a lot of collet organizers. And so it's just like, we would just throw basically any organizational or shop project at Riley, and he would just kind of handle it, which was amazing. And we had David, our intern. David was there to help out Riley or help out anyone else in the shop. And so it was great to have David, and hopefully we'll have David back this summer kind of thing as well.
Awesome. That's a killer. Yeah, that will be fantastic. Cause you bought a bamboo right before or right as Riley started as well, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think we had gotten it like a little bit before Riley. So that was great that he could just kind of hit the ground running with that thing.
Totally. Yeah. All right. Well, the last one from the Patreon, Doug asks us both, if you had $1 million to invest in your business within 1 year, how would you spend it? And what are the top challenges that could prevent you from realizing the ROI from how you would spend it?
It's kind of sad that I'm at the point right now where I'm looking at $1 million and thinking there's probably only like 1 or 2 things I can do with that money.
Right. Yeah. I very much, when I saw that number, I was like, well, yeah, I mean, that's like the next few purchases added up anyway. So sure.
Yeah, I guess I'd probably go with what our next move is hopefully going to be. I can get into why we're not doing that quite yet, but basically, I think we're going to end up with a mill turn. We're almost exclusively a turning shop now. We do have 2 Speedios, but I joke that those are our advanced live tooling because that's what we use them for. I mean, we basically use them for when we have parts where there's more tools than I can fit into the current number of live tools that I have in the machine. We move it to the Speedio. So I would probably end up with a mill turn, which, to be honest, when you tool up a mill turn and like pay for the machine itself, that's right at about $1 million, maybe a little
That's
less.
the budget right there.
Let's see. Top challenges to prevent it from realizing maximum. It would definitely be programming and just training. I think even if you spend $1 million just like buying a mill turn, programming a mill turn is so much more complicated than just like programming a 2-axis lathe.
Right.
Especially if it's one with a lower turret that's like a dual channel control. And like now you're dealing with like 2 separate G-code programs with weight codes. So I think probably that would be a big challenge. And that's maybe one reason why we haven't kind of gone that route quite yet, is just because right now we already struggle in the shop with basically the kind of current realization is that our big bottleneck right now is that I am kind of the only one that can tackle some of the parts that are coming in from our customers. And so I'm running around helping everyone with everything and trying to get parts done. And I realized that the bottleneck in teaching my employees programming right now is the fact that they just don't have enough simple parts to program.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Because like you've kind of specialized in the extremely complicated turn mill kind of style parts, and then it's not like you can say like, oh, go screw up on that $1,000 piece of, exotic stainless or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's part of it too, is like a lot of our parts, like some of the stuff like the part I was running today looks like your average like hydraulic piston, but it's out of 15.5 H1025. And so it's gummier than ever. And I'm sitting here battling all day, trying to hold the tolerances that the customer wants, while also battling the fact that my tools keep chipping out and like I can't get the chips out of the board when I'm grooving kind of thing. So I'm having to stop every like 2 seconds to like pull chips out of the board kind of thing. So yeah, no, I think probably the biggest problem of getting a mill turn up and running would be the programming and just like time required to kind of set that up and get everything running. What about you?
Yeah, $1 million. I mean, that's that's not the budget for the next purchases, but like that's fairly close to like an HS Flex fully tooled up, the CMM we want, hypermill, like the purchases we're currently making or looking to make get us pretty close to that number. And that's exactly what I would spend it on. And that's what we need to spend it on. Automation is really where we need to be, because hiring has been not something that either of us really wants to tackle right now. Or training, I guess, is more the thing. Like right now, we really need to be able to push more parts through the shop. And I really don't think that, like, we'll definitely hire somebody in the next maybe 12 months for shipping and receiving and all the other little stuff. But like, that's not going to move the needle that much, I don't think. Whereas being able to run 10 hours overnight, every night if we need to, will move that needle quite a bit. So that's the investment. And then the challenges, are definitely time. As I start getting into hypermill more, I'm like so stoked on it. There's so many things I really like about it, but you have to put in a lot of time. Like the tool library will take a lot of time to dial in and put all of our tools in and make it useful. Automation Center is super powerful, but like, again, I have to sit there and try it and figure out exactly how I want it to look and all that stuff so that Brad and I can use it very efficiently. So I'm just going to have to find that time.
I'll pose an interesting question. Rephrasing that same question. If you had $1 million 5 years ago, what would you have done with it? Do you think you would jump to the Hermle HS Flex, or do you think you would have bought more cheaper machines, or like how would you have used that money a couple of years ago?
That's a good question. I don't know that I would have had the balls to jump right into the flex, but like I probably still would have bought a C250 or something along those lines. Like I knew for sure 5 years ago that that's where we needed to head towards, but I in no way was experienced enough to like be firm in that decision of like, oh, Hermla is the way that I want to go, or oh, DMG is the way I want to go. Like at that point, I was just about to go full time, or I was like a year before I went full time, and so like the I was still, I think, very much learning just how to run a shop with 3 machines and Brad and acquire customers and all that stuff. And so I think I probably would have bought a 5-axis, but I really have no idea what I would have bought at that point. I don't remember, what metaphorical poster was on my wall at that point for a 5-axis.
I think that's a funny thing. It was like it just hit me as you said that you were a year from going self-employed. That means that I think I've been self-employed for like 5 years at this point.
Yeah, because you were a little bit before me. Yeah. So
That's
this must
crazy.
be your 5th year.
Yeah, this must be my 5th year. That's insane.
That's killer. What about you? What would you have spent $1 million on 5 years ago?
I think I would have spent it on the wrong thing. I think like thinking about it, I think I would have gone for like a few 6-axis lathes with like bar feeders and like tried to kind of get into production machining. And I think that would have probably been the wrong move. I don't think that I would have kind of realized that what I like doing a lot more is prototype production. And so like we're doing prototypes of things. And then I think where I see myself going in like 5 years from now kind of thing is like what I really like to do is have some production jobs that are just running kind of constantly in the background. And then the majority of the shop is just running prototypes. And I think that I would have kind of shoehorned myself into like smaller bar production machines and probably not gotten to where we are kind of thing today.
Okay. That's really, really interesting. Yeah. All right. From Instagram, Lone Wolf Precision asked, as a certified millbilly, what is the best way to reduce setups in the turning world? I constantly see complaints about lathe setup times. What have you done to reduce that? And then to piggyback off that one too, Emergo CNC said, lathe turret layout tips. What goes where so that you don't need to shuffle everything around for the next job? And he has a live tooling 2-axis lathe. So give us your tips and tricks. How did you make prototyping on a lathe work for you guys?
Yeah, I guess I'll go start off with a disclaimer that I have no idea what I'm talking about, and anybody takes any advice from me is not necessarily the smartest person. But
all right, disclaimer out of the way. You have a good business.
I think what we do
what
is
are you doing?
We have like a standard set of tools, and I have a very like odd legacy way of laying out turrets that like I think I just started doing back at my old day job, and it's kind of carried over. Any odd number tool is a radial style tool. So like a turning tool, a parting tool, a radial live tool for like working on the OD of a part. Any even number tools I have laid out as axial style. So like a drill, a boring bar, a axial live tool. I can't really tell you why I started doing that, but what that means that is that you can kind of lay out my turret pretty from starting at position 1. We have a parting tool because you either start or end with a parting tool on every cycle. You're either doing a top cut to like square up a bar before you cut, or you finish the cycle with cutting off the part.
Right.
Next up, and I don't know why we did this. This is like, it doesn't really make sense. It just makes sense for us. Our tool 2 is a boring bar. Well, I guess, so part of this comes down to, it depends on the lathe you're running, but like on our lathes, by spacing out the tools every other, you get more clearance on each one compared to if you put like 3 drills in a row. You
Oh, I gotcha.
basically are battling one drill hitting the chuck while you're drilling with the other one. So I think that's probably, I guess, I'm kind of thinking through this as I'm talking. So I'm going to probably contradict myself a couple times, but that's why we've got them spaced out like that. So I guess we go parting tool and then our boring bar. And our boring bar is capto, so we can switch out between like whatever boring bars we've got. They're all in capto holders kind of thing. So we can just swap out between, and that could be something like a PH horn, like System 105, like a solid carbide bar, or it could be a 3/4 inch, like solid carbide, huge boring bar. That goes in tool 2. Tool 3 is our finisher. And we've standardized, I think this is one thing that we like definitely do well for prototypes that I think people get like really hung up on. I see a lot of people when they first get into lathes are like really obsessed with, well, if I go with a DNMG insert, it's like slightly stronger than a V style, where I can get a negative rake. And like, I think those things are really important for when you're doing production machining, where you are making the same part 20,000 times. If you can push a little harder on the finish pass, you might get a better like cycle time. For us, we don't care. So we've standardized using VCMT or VCGT inserts. It's a 35-degree diamond insert. They're positive rake, and we can get them in any flavor basically of inserts. We can get aluminum inserts, we can get steel inserts, stainless, etc. They're not the strongest insert in the world, but we use them for finishing, so it doesn't have to be that strong. And if we have to feed at a slightly slower feed rate, that's fine. But what the big advantage of a VCMT insert is you can back turn 45 degrees.
Okay.
So I can plunge cut, like I don't need a grooving tool to do a thread relief.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Because I can just plunge a thread relief.
Right.
I don't need a grooving tool to do a backside chamfer basically on a part. And so instead of getting hung up on like, if it's a simple part, we won't even use the sub spindle. What we'll do is we'll just back turn a chamfer, part it off, and then clean up the pip on the manual lathe or on the mill or something. And so that allows us to get that back chamfer on. So that's what we've standardized for tool 3 is a like V style insert. For tool 4 is our like first drill position. That's kind of a floater position. So it's either like, it'll either be like an ID groover, or it'll be a drill, or it'll be a tap or whatever. Or if we have like 2 boring bars for a part, it'll go there. For the tool 5 is our primary rougher. I probably should switch around 3 and 5. I'm not really sure why I started putting the rougher in 5, but at this point, all of our lathes are configured that way. So I'm not going to really change it, but
Right.
like a turret change time for us doesn't add anything. Like it doesn't really make a big difference. But like our tool 5, we standardized on WNMG inserts. And we used to actually use like a WNMG insert for aluminum and one for steel and one for stainless. And we realized slowly that the best rougher for aluminum is a stainless insert.
Right. Well, I'm sure you just don't have to change it out then too. Like,
Yeah.
that's the kind
So
of
we
nice
just
thing.
like never change tool 5. It's always a WNMG, like it's literally always a WNMG 432, and it's an ISCAR insert meant for like high temp alloys. It's probably the most expensive aluminum rougher on the planet, but it doesn't matter because it doesn't wear out when we're running aluminum.
Yeah.
And when we're running steel and stainless, it's already in there. And we just like, part of it too is, I guess, I can't even remember the last time we've cut actual like carbon steel or like alloy steel in the shop. It was probably over like 3 or 4 months ago.
Yeah.
So we cut basically aluminum, plastic, or stainless. Tool 6 is our primary drill position on both lathes. It's like, anyone who's run a lathe knows that putting a drill into a lathe kind of sucks because you have to like swing indicate this position for the drill. or have a really dialed probe, which we do on our SC300, but not on our SC250. So what we do on both machines is we just leave an ER collet in there. On the SC300, it's a captive ER collet, so we can like just swap
So
it
even
out
better.
for whatever.
Yeah.
But on our SC250, it's just an ER20 Regofix holder that I spent like 2 hours perfectly dialing in every way. And I have like a coolant line plumb to it. And that's our drill position.
That's
So
smart. I like that.
if you need a on-center drill, you just stick it in tool 6. And all you have to do then is you only have to touch off the link. You don't have to touch off the location.
Right.
Tool 7 is our threading tool. We have a really good coolant fed threading tool. So it's like a direct coolant coming right out at the tip of the insert. That's another, I guess, tip is we've bought all 3 coolant turning tools because I don't want to have to like mess around with like putting in copper lines or like bending lines or anything like that.
Right.
I've done that in the past. And like by buying the little bit more expensive tools, I just don't have to worry about that.
Are you using mostly topping inserts and things like that, or what?
We're
What do you use
actually
there?
not. I guess we use a lot of topping inserts when we're doing like UNJ, but like a standard threading insert that can do multiple threads is usually what we just leave in there.
Okay.
So I think that covers most of them. Sometimes like tool 9 is like a grooving tool. Tool 8 is our like last position that we commonly keep like a turning tool or a drilling tool or something in there. On the SC300, tool 8 is usually a live tool. We have live tooling on our older Nakamura. We just really don't use it too much because it's kind of an old machine and it doesn't process code quite as fast as our new one. And usually it's faster just to blank out the part, throw it on. I guess most of the audience probably knows this, but like our average part order is like 1 to 10 parts. So you can get away with a lot of just like doing a second op to add a melt feature rather than doing live tooling. So it's kind of standardized on that. And then the rest of the tools are kind of floaters. And so like, I think a lot of people by doing more things like adding more specialized tools that might be significantly better for the specific application, they end up changing turret blocks and coolant lines a lot more. And I feel like that's where you really slow down.
That makes sense. Yeah. For sure. Keeping on the turning topic, Preston Murray asked, how do you deal with Fusion's lack of ability to add small ID face grooves and threading tools for turning? So yeah, let's talk about just programming in general and then address that. What have you learned? I know you're using the container method for the SC300, but any other things you've learned?
Yeah, I guess we have a pretty standardized tool library, which helps a lot. All of those tools that I just mentioned in the turret, those are all in with feeds and speeds for every material we cut. And so you can kind of just grab the tool and run with it. I mean, you might have to tweak the speeds and speeds a little bit. So that helps a lot on programming. I think we need to maybe make more templates. We're pretty bad about that. And that's something I'd like to maybe sit down and deal with, but it's hard to sometimes find the time to sit down and deal with templates when you're knee deep in trying to get the part out the door.
Totally. Yeah.
So in terms of the small solid ID and face groove tools, basically my strategy is to heavily lie to Fusion and basically just spend the like 2 hours it takes to like screw around in Fusion and get it to basically build a close enough looking tool to what you can buy off the shelf. And then know that even if the simulation's like a little bit wrong, that it'll be probably fine in the machine.
Nothing like probably fine to give you the warm and fuzzies, right?
Yeah, I guess it's the Fusion lathe sim is so lacking in terms of actual like collision avoidance that like you're not really losing anything by lying to Fusion.
Gotcha.
If
You
that
just
makes
don't have
sense.
to prove it on the machine and make sure
Yeah.
that it's right.
And so like you still have to prove out your program and basically until Fusion gets like better, like full actual turret sim, because your majority of your collisions on a lathe are going to be that you can't catch with like just the normal sim. are going to be like your turret hitting the firewall or the turret hitting the sub spindle or like your tool in an adjacent position being too close or something. And you're not going to be able to get any of that until Fusion gets better, like actual full sim, which I think they've been talking about for a while, but I just like haven't seen it actually in reality.
Yeah. For sure.
So like an example, we use a lot of like PH1 tooling, like their System 105. We have a lot of their stuff. And I can usually lie to Fusion enough to get the tool in there, at least with good enough geometry that Fusion can post out code that I can run.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a great answer.
I think it's a kind of a poor answer. Like I don't actually have a great answer of like how we deal with it. I think we just don't deal with it and we just kind of lie. But
I mean, with as many parts as you guys make, I feel like if there was a good way to do it, you would know it by now. So I think that like, it might not be the answer that anybody wants to hear, but that's probably a good answer because it's complete.
that's fair. Yeah.
All right. On the business topics, Tom Machinist asked, what's the most unforeseen thing on scaling up a business and what are the unexpected expenses on scaling the business?
I think an interesting one that like I didn't see until it was way too late, and I think is like a really important, I guess, pitfall that like hopefully other people won't fall into, is I didn't understand when you see the cost of training. You would think that the cost of like training employees is going to be all upfront. And like you would see like a dip in revenue or whatever, a dip in like your overall cash flow kind of thing when you're hiring employees and like they're not being as productive. But I think the pitfall we ran into where we like ended up in some like kind of tough spots, cash flow wise kind of thing, is when my employees were hired, we had so much kind of like cash in the bank that like I didn't see the cost of like the lack of productivity until probably 4 or 5 months later. And then you're like sitting there like going, why are we not making money all of a sudden? And you realize that it's not because you were making money until just now. It's that you haven't been making money. It's something like I maybe should have caught sooner, but like if you know what I'm talking about, like of like it basically was we're not making as many parts and we're not shipping parts as quickly because I'm spending time hand holding on every single question kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. Not to mention, machine downtime and, having to remake parts and things like that. Like, yeah, it all adds up, but I can see how that would be maybe not a silent killer, but like something that definitely sneaks up on you.
Yeah, it basically was like we hired enough employees all at once that like it felt like we were being productive, but our actual overall part output was down because when normally I can just kind of put in a pair of headphones and just grind out a set of parts, I'm getting asked, hey, is this packaging okay? Like, hey, does this look okay if I put the sticker like this? It's like, I don't care. But like when you hire employees that don't know what's going on, they're going to ask you questions like that because they want to make sure they're doing a good job. And like, I appreciate that. And it's slowly working on getting them to be autonomous is the real struggle. And that's where like you end up spending so much money just getting them to the point where they can like actually make money. And that's, I think, was a big thing that like I didn't see while we scaled up. And like, I'm in a spot now where I'm clawing back from that kind of thing. And we've seen it in like our part on time deliveries as we've been falling behind on some on time deliveries. And that's because we're spending so much time on just like making bad parts. And we're not going to allow those bad parts out of the shop. So that means that we're end up remaking parts and we're just scrapping more and everything. And so it's like the actual just like spin up time to get employees going is so much longer than I think I ever expected.
Yeah, it sounds rough. Like we've talked enough over the years that like, it definitely has given me a lot of things to check off before we hire somebody. Like, and it's like, oh, I need time to do all of this stuff, or I need to make time now to document that stuff so that they're not asking me like, where does the label go on the package? It's like, read the binder, man.
I think the craziest thing is, even if you have those like things documented, they're still going to ask you those questions. And so I think working on strategies, like this has been a big thing lately that I've been working on with my guys, is just like trying to push the question back onto them. And like, they are smart. They know what they're doing. And like, I think we hit a wall. Like, I think the big problem that we're kind of dealing with right now is that I think I didn't talk about this earlier, but I've got them both programmed now. Like my two younger staff, they're at a point where they're able to start throwing down toolpaths in Fusion.
Awesome.
And they'll get to a point where they're like 98% done with the program. There's maybe like one or two toolpaths that's like kind of questionable, but would probably run. And they'll freeze. And they will just like, I'll catch them just like doing random bullshit instead of actually posting their program and running.
Right.
Because they're like, I don't know if they're scared. I don't know if that's an appropriate term, because I don't think, knowing my staff, scared is not necessarily a term that like applies to either one of them. They're both very strong-willed employees kind of thing, but they just kind of get hung up on like, maybe this program's not quite ready to run, so I won't run it. And like, when I'm trying to get them to a point which they can just kind of go for it, and like, they don't need my permission to kind of move to the next step. And so like, asking them sometimes some of those questions, or trying to kind of let the leash out a little bit. And it's definitely a personal thing too, of like, I'm not a great manager, and I'm like trying to figure out what it means to be a good manager of my staff, kind of thing, where I need to keep the leash taut enough that they don't end up blowing up my like $100,000 machine, but like let the leash out enough that they feel like they can kind of gain some of those skills. And so like, I think one of the things that I've been like talking to my customers about, and I guess this is the shameless plug on the podcast, like if you have simple stuff that you want turned or milled, I guess even, we'll even open it up to that kind of thing. Like, I'm trying to just find simple stuff for my employees to run so that they can kind of get some more experience running it. Like, they're super attention to detail. Like, they're really good at the QC now. They're great at just like grabbing a part from me, running through a full inspection, writing up a report, etc. But like, what they're horrible at is actually just moving through the whole process by themselves. And that's definitely mostly on me, of like figuring out how to give them the autonomy to do that.
Right. Well, and I imagine, you mentioned not being a good manager, but like, I think, we're all doing our best. We're all, living that imposter syndrome, but like on top of it, you're teaching and employing people who like, and this is not a slight to Dragos or Matt 2.0, but like, they're not fully baked people yet. Like, I remember how I was at 18, 19, 20. Like, I was a total dummy. Like, you just make stupid mistakes because you're that young. And so like, I imagine having to deal with that like personality and personal problem stuff is just an added issue, or, an added challenge on top for you, on top of all that. Like, nobody at 18 is a mature adult yet.
Yeah. And I think it's also, I've run into some problems too, of like, at least with Dragos, like I've known him for longer than he's been my employee. And so like, there's been times where I've struggled with like a lack of just like respect in the workplace. And like, it's not a slight at him at all. He's known me as a friend before he's known me as like his boss. And so it's like trying to work through like being a friendly boss while also not being like, this is a corporate workplace. But finding that in between has been hard for me. And like, that's something that like, it's going to be tough. And like, we've done stuff like, we as a whole team, we built an employee handbook of like what we expect in the workplace. And I think that's been really good to like know that there's like a common set of just like values that we all share.
Totally. Yeah. I think you like the things that we've talked about through text and stuff. It sounds like you're really, doing your best to kind of navigate this. Like, it's it's all stuff that makes me incredibly nervous about hiring people, is like having to deal with that.
And it is tough. But like, I think that at the same time, it's like, it's so amazing too, to be able to just like pass off tasks. And like, I'm not talking about just like passing off the task of like cleaning the bathroom. Like, I'm still more than happy to get down on my knees and scrub the floor in the bathroom, like scrub the toilet. Like, that's always going to be part of my job, and that's always going to be part of my employee's job. Like, I'm never going to ask any one of my employees to do something I'm not willing to do myself. And I try and make that really clear to them, is like, anything I'm going to ask you to do is something I've either done or like I'm still willing to do. I just don't have the time right now, and I need to go work on something else.
Right.
And
Yeah. It's not like you didn't build this business from nothing. Like, we all saw the hard work and talked about it on past episodes. Like, you've been busting your ass for years. And so, yeah, I think that, that
but at the
comes
same time,
across.
I can't fall on that. And like, I can't use that to like explain it to them, because I think it's tough for them to understand that, because they weren't there
Well,
and
yeah,
they
yeah.
didn't see
But
that.
like,
And so
even
it's
tonight,
like,
you were there till what, 7:30 or 8? Like, you were right up to the ship deadline. Like, that's ownership right there. That's not employee shit.
yeah, and I'm never going to ask them to do that, because like that's just not fair. And like, they are so above and beyond sometimes, where like, I think we run this one job for one of our customers. It is one of our few production jobs. It's literally the dumbest part you've ever seen. It's a like 3/4 inch diameter, 3/4 inch long tube nut. It's just got a half 13 thread on the ID, and we make thousands of. And there you get welded onto a part for a customer. And when that job comes through, watching my employees just like jump on it and just like run through it is amazing.
Oh, I bet.
And like, it's incredible watching what they can do. And like, I remember a night or something where we had an opportunity to like deliver parts the next day, kind of thing. And Dragos just like decided to stay till 10 p.m. or something, and just keep running. And that was amazing. And like, having employees that have the work ethic and like want to be here is more than I could have ever asked for. Kind of thing.
Totally. Yeah. All right. We got 2 more questions. First up, Molly No wanted us to talk about the new Bamboo H2D. So have you looked at it at all? Any interest?
Not really, actually. I haven't really looked into it at all. I saw like a picture of it, but I don't know much more about it.
I want it. I don't want the laser one. I have no interest in like the laser and paper cutter and all that stuff, but the base
What makes
printer
it
with
different from the X1C?
bigger work volume. So it has 2 nozzles. So you can feed filament to both. So if you're doing multicolor prints, you no longer have to like do all the purge and stuff, as long as it's 2. And then it's much bigger. I think if you use 1 nozzle, it's like 325 by 325 by 320 or something like that. So a fair bit bigger than the X1C. And then just like a million more sensors. Like they're using a servo instead of a stepper in the extruder and in the AMS. So it'll sense clogs faster. There's like there's a camera on the nozzle now to detect clogs. There's a big bird's eye camera that detects stuff better. Just, bigger, better, all that stuff. Like all the things that they've learned over the last few years. The AMS now will dry filament overnight. Like it'll open the drying port and just blow hot air over all the filaments and keep them dry. Just, little stuff like that.
That sounds really nice. We've been wildly struggling with our bamboo for the last like 2 or 3 months. And
No way.
I finally, I think, figured out what was going on yesterday.
Was it belt tension?
No. So we've just got like, effectively, like, this is so much easier to explain to machinists. It's really funny to explain this to my friends who like know about 3D printing but don't know about machining. Basically, our like quote unquote work offset, like our Z offset, is off.
Oh, weird. Even with like auto calibration and stuff?
Yes. So no matter how many times we auto calibrate, bed level, etc., it'll just start printing like half a layer height above the bed.
Oh, weird.
And like, we could not figure it out. And basically, and the weirdest part about it is you basically stop the print, hit print again, and it'll print fine. And so we just get like failed print after failed print after failed print of just like bad Z height. And we like tried the calibration, we cleaned the LiDAR, we cleaned blah, blah, blah. And everybody keeps asking me like, oh, is the nozzle clean? Like, cause you're using the nozzle for probing. I'm like, yeah, the nozzle's fine. That turns out that was totally it. Then when you
So
like
what did you
initially
do? Replace that wiper in the back?
no, so the wiper's fine too. It's like we replaced the wiper and we still have the same problem. Basically, what I don't have a solution yet because I ordered the replacement part. We're gonna find out if this solves it.
Okay.
But I was like, finally yesterday after another failed print, I was like, all right, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna just swap the nozzle just to make my friend Max happy, who keeps saying, oh, it's your nozzle.
Mm-hmm.
And I pull the nozzle out and like the instructions are like, oh yeah, you like take this little like silicone shroud off, you take the like little stainless shroud off, and you can pull the heating element off and the thermistor off, put them onto the new nozzle, slip the stainless steel thing on, and the whole thing goes back in with like 2 bolts and 3 cables. I was like, cool, this seems like this will take me under 10 minutes. I pull the thing off. I can't get the silicone sock off.
Oh,
And so then I keep trying to get the silicone sock off, and I pull the silicone sock off, and the entire nozzle cartridge is coated in like a maybe 4th thou thick layer of filament.
huh.
And
Interesting. Almost like half a layer height. Weird.
yeah, it's like the tip of the nozzle doesn't look bad, but what I'm guessing it is like right above the tip as it like transitions from the cone onto the square body of the nozzle. The like little purge line must be sticking to it, getting under the nozzle, and then it's probing on top of a piece of filament. But by the time I actually watch it like do the first layer, it's wiped the nozzle again.
Oh, interesting. Uh-huh.
And so like I've never been able to catch it with like filament under the nozzle, but that's probably what's been going on.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
So I couldn't get it apart. So I just ordered from Bamboo like the full cartridge assembly with the hot end fan and everything. I was just like, I'm just going to swap the whole cartridge out.
It's cheap enough that it's like, whatever. It's what, $40 or something like that?
Yes. So we'll see if that fixes it. But like we had like 6 months of just like perfect printing. And then just like we ran it to the death basically. And I think that's where we might be having the problems. So
Interesting.
it's no fault of Bamboo's. To answer, I guess, Tom's question, do I still have love for Prusa? Yes, I do have love for Prusa, but I really like when the Bamboo changes colors and just does everything for me.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I think it's like, it's the difference between wanting 3D printing as a hobby and wanting a 3D printer appliance. And it's like, I'm at the point where it's like, I don't need another hobby. I don't need something to mess around. I just want an appliance that like I want it to be like my, printer paper, like just hit print and it prints out.
Whoa, I don't want that because my printers are not reliable.
Okay. Well, mine is. And I just want it to be able to print and have it just spit out the part. And like the Bamboo's up it for the most part. Like we've got 2 now and they've been dead reliable. And the new one just looks even more reliable now. And it's like, okay, I kind of want that.
Do you have 2 X1 carbons or do you have like a P1S or what do you have?
We have 2 X1 carbons. Yeah.
Okay.
I honestly I like the LiDAR and all the safety stuff that's built into the X1C over the P1S. And I just didn't want to have to like develop a new process. I was like, I want copy paste, throw another X1C at it.
That's fair. Yeah, that's probably what we should do. We're like in the middle of like, we got to restart like 2 organization projects that we like stopped over the summer and we just need to finish them off. Like we've got this one gigantic Vidmar cabinet that we like store it's only for collets. And we need to finish printing like 200 of these little dovetail pieces that Riley designed. And the larger ones for like the QG collets can only fit 1 on the bed at a time.
Right.
So.
Yep. Totally understand. Well, maybe I'll have a cheap X1C for you to pick up instead of buying a new one.
We'll see how I'm giving it like 3 weeks before you fold and end up buying one.
Well, we'll see. They're not, if they were available immediately, I would be a lot more tempted. But like, I think I don't remember what the pre-order date is right now, or the next shipment date is. And so it's like, I'm sure I'll forget about it for a few months. And then I'll be like, oh, right, those things do look sick. Let's get one. Even just to have like a second, because the issue, or I don't know if it's an issue, but it's a bug or a feature. Like, you can have an AMS hooked up to each one of the heads in the HD2, but that means you have to have two AMSs. But I would love to have like just a contrast color constantly loaded in the second head. So like I could do contrast text without the time penalty. Because that's really what keeps me from doing it right now, is that like, I don't want to add an hour and a half to my print so that it can do, 40 poops in the back while it's changing filaments.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically all we use the AMS for, is contrast text.
Right. Yeah, like right now we just load it with 4 of the same color PETG, and I just let it burn through it, and like I never have to worry about, is there enough filament in there, because I always have at least a backup in there. But it would be nice to go back to actually doing colored text and things like that. All right, last question. Tell me a sad story. We had many people ask how the Prius is doing. And
yeah,
this might be a little too soon, but tell us a sad story.
So I was on my way to, we have a weekly Friday Rocket Club meeting with the high schoolers. So I was going on my way over there. This is like 2 or 3 Fridays ago. And there's like this one section of the highway on the way over there where that's always a little bit sketchy, because it just like bottles up with people for some reason in the far right lane. And so I'm always like a little bit cautious of that. But basically, somebody in front of me slammed on their brakes. I had enough space to like slow down fully and stop. And then the person behind me did not. So they slammed into me. And unfortunately, the insurance company decided that a 2012 Toyota Prius was not worth saving, kind of thing. So they ended up totaling out my Prius. So I am officially do not have the best shop truck I've ever owned anymore.
You know what? I would love to hate on it, but it was super comfortable driving down IMTS with you. Like, we got great gas mileage. I understand it.
Dude, I hate on that car too. Like, I was a Prius owner. I'll probably be a Prius owner again. And like, it's an ugly car that's slow-ish. They're not as slow as I think people think they are, because I think usually it's just old people driving them. But they're like, it's a slow, lame car. But I get 55 miles to the gallon.
It's insane.
And it's got enough trunk space that I can put a full-size air compressor in the back comfortably.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't complain too much about that.
So I'll probably be looking for another Prius, but unfortunately, Prius number 1, the original Moria shop truck. Actually, it's the second Moria shop truck. Nothing will replace the original Moria shop truck, the 2000 Toyota Camry.
Yeah. The Camry with so much rust. Oh my gosh. Oh my God, that thing.
And the best part is that didn't even have that much rust compared to like some of the cars I see around.
Yeah, well, you're talking to an Arizona boy, and like it was insane. Alrighty, Brad. That brings us on to shop news and new things. Anything else we didn't talk about that's new or exciting in your world?
Let's see. I'm trying to think if there's anything super new. I guess there's one really big new thing. We are actively looking for a new shop space, because unfortunately, the shop is going to be turned into a new development for apartments. So they're tearing down at the end of the year the whole building, and we need to figure out where and when to move before then. So that's obviously top of the mind kind of thing of just like figuring that out amongst everything else.
That's so frustrating. Ugh, I'm sorry, dude. But hopefully onwards to bigger and better places.
Yeah, we're looking for a bigger shop for sure. I think the biggest thing we're out of is office space. We're like very cramped in the office we have in the shop. It's
I know, I couldn't even sleep there this time. this last IMTS. It was a bummer.
I forgot that you and Brad slept at the shop in the office the first IMTS.
Blew up a couple mattresses. It was great. It was the only room that was like full AC, or, at least an appropriately sized AC for that room. We slept great that night. But yeah, you guys are, to take an old phrase from me, you guys are pretty packed in there.
Yeah, you guys have just marginally bigger shop than we do currently. So I guess you guys get to say that to us now.
Probably the only time I'm going to be able to get to. So I want to enjoy it while I can. All right. Well, then on to the last questions picked by the Patreon members. First up, one CAM, metrology, or business tip or trick that helped you this week.
Ooh. Do you want to go first on this one?
Let's circle back. I always bring this one up, and I think every single guest has had to circle back. So let's go on to the next one. What challenge are you facing, and where are you looking for help?
I think a big challenge, like I said, is just figuring out how to get my employees comfortable with jumping into programming. I think the other one that's like difficult to teach, and I like kind of threw this one to the side for a long time of like not realizing that it was a big problem. I like used to joke, I think even to you, about like that I didn't fully understand the point of like prove and cut and like other like feeds and speeds calculators. And I'm realizing now that that's just because I learned feeds and speeds so early that I just like never thought it was a problem. And watching my staff try and figure out feeds and speeds has been like, man, maybe I should get one of these like feeds and speeds calculators for them kind of thing. And so like, I think one challenge that I'm facing is like, I guess it's two challenges. It's getting them to program, but I think one of their bottlenecks in programming is feeds and speeds.
Yeah.
If they get stuck on that.
I think a lot of people do. Like, I think that it takes a lot of reps of like looking up a ton of tools, and then you kind of just start internalizing like, okay, I've seen these SFM numbers a million times. I can kind of internalize that as like, okay, this is good for almost all stainless. We're going to be good to go with this, things like that. That's a really tough one. So what are you thinking of how to solve that?
Well, what I've been doing is part of it too is on my end where I need to go through and I need to work on our tool library and really like nail down and actually get our tool library filled in with feeds and speeds. Cause sometimes they'll like open up a tool and I'll be like, no, actually that's not quite the right feeds and speeds. You just got to tweak that like a little bit. And every time I say that, I should probably be going back and actually fixing it.
Right.
So that's a little bit on me. And like, so I need to deal with that, but also just like what we did is, and this is actually a big shout out to my wonderful girlfriend who's probably going to listen to this for absolutely no reason. But she's been on spring break and she's just got like a great brain for thinking about admin kind of things. And so she's been helping me come up with like some different documents to have in the shop to like help employees. Like she made one the other day that was just called the get off your phone and do something document.
I love that. You shared a picture and it was perfect.
It's a laminated sheet that you can take a dry erase marker and check off items. And so like basically if you don't know what else to do and I've got my headphones in and my head buried in a machine, instead of coming to bother me, go grab something off the sheet and do it. There's everything on there from like go clean the bathroom to take out the trash to change the filters in the machines, etc.
Right. Check the coolant, all that stuff. Yeah.
And the other sheet she made is a ideal weekly schedule. And so we're still like shopping this and like seeing how this works. But basically it's if everything goes right during a week, which it never does, these are the basic steps for each day. And so like we broke it out. So like there's on Mondays, you do RFQs. So that's obviously a task for me, but like there's going to be other tasks on there that are like when you should be programming the jobs for that week. And again, like tweaking programs and things the next day, totally fine. But like you should be at the point the next day where you're like at the machine starting to like run. And one of the things we added on there was a lunch and learn, because I realized I do this to my employees because I'm just like obsessed with machining. They probably hate me for it, but like I'll just be like, hey guys, come over here and like check out this YouTube video. And instead of just like doing that at random times, I think we're going to do that as a much more formal thing. Like, so what we're going to be doing is I think on Tuesdays, we're going to be at lunch, we're going to watch a video or learn about something. And so yesterday we talked about window frame machining because I mentioned window frame machining and they had no idea what that meant. So we like talked about it. And we watched a couple like YouTube videos on window machining and learned about that. But like, I think what we're going to do is probably watch more videos that have like, we're probably going to go back to like where I learned a lot of my machining from, which is like Wednesday widgets. And so we're going to watch those, and those have a lot of like feeds and speeds basics. And
Totally.
so I think that's going to be one way I'm going to mitigate that challenge. That was like a very long-winded answer.
No, that was great. Work-life balance. What does it mean to you and how do you manage it? Is it any different from 5 or 10 years ago?
A work-life balance still doesn't fully exist. I'm usually thinking about the shop 24 hours a day, but it's gotten a lot better in the terms of like, I actually have things outside of work, like Rocket Club or hanging out with Ashlyn and things like that. So like I have other things in my life that I want to do outside of work now. So there is like a little bit more of a balance, but it's still like, I mean, obviously again, I was here till 7:30. Well, I'm still here, but like this is fun now. But like I was here making parts until 7:30 kind of thing. And
Right.
so like I think there's still room for more work-life balance, but I think until my employees get to a point where they're a little bit more efficient, I'm still going to be having less of a work-life balance probably than I'd like to.
Right. Yeah. I think at some point, you know, any business owner, at least when you're still working in the business too, you're just not going to have what rational, normal human beings would consider a good work-life balance. Like I'm obsessed with it. You're obsessed with it. We still enjoy it, but it's in no way normal.
It's enjoyable until you get the like nightmare at 2 a.m. about like a feature on a part that you are second guessing whether or not you checked it, but it's already shipped.
Oh yeah, that happens.
What about you? How's your work-life balance looking with everything going on with you about to have a kid and everything like that?
Honestly, actually, like it's been not terrible. It's not been great, but it hasn't been as bad as it might seem from the outside. Like I have been able to leave for, you know, doctor's appointments and all that stuff. We talked to all of our customers, I think about 2.5, 3 weeks ago, and just kind of said like, hey, this is upcoming. We're going to have reduced capacity. You know, just wanted to let you know. And everybody's just been very nice about it and totally fine with it. So,
hey, I mean, what are they going to say? They're going to say, actually, no, you can't have a kid. I need my parts.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. But they've been like very congratulatory and just excited for me. So that's been great. But we've been staying busy enough that like I'm not freaking out either. We're getting enough work where it's like, all right, we're doing fine. We're not crushing as hard as we did in January and February, but like this is a fine month. So yeah, it's not been the best, but it hasn't been as terrible as I thought it would be.
I think that's also like a good thing too, though. Like we've been in spots in the shop where like right now we're at a really good spot where we have like the right amount of work. We don't have too little, we don't have too much. And like we've ended 2024 with just drowning in work.
Yeah.
And it was like a little bit bad because like I warned my employees, I was like, hey, by the way, November is usually when things get crazy. And then like September hit. And it was already crazy. And they were like, wow, this is like crazy. And I was like, watch, it's going to get worse. Yeah. And then it got worse. And it like didn't slow down until like maybe a month or so ago. And like, we're finally catching up and like, but it doesn't feel slow. And I think that's hopefully where you guys are at as well of like, it's not swamped, but it's not slow.
Yeah. Yeah. It feels good right now. Like we're definitely going to want to ramp it up when I get back from leave. But for now, it's a nice kind of slide into home for my leave. I'm feeling good about it. All right. Next up, what thing that doesn't really pencil out have you bought that you wouldn't be without? just for the reduced aggravation, fatigue, or aversion?
I actually am going to put CMM in that category.
Okay.
I think it does pencil out, but like I don't know if we use it as much as like I expected us to use it. I think when we first got it, we used it like 15 times a day.
Right.
And
You're
then
like checking holes that you could check with pins, but using the CMM, stuff like that. You're like, ooh, fancy toy. Okay.
And we've like settled back out of that. And like an example of that today, this morning was actually, well, this was like a dual purpose, like learning lesson kind of thing too, was one of my employees, or actually both of them, they were working on some parts that just had like basic tapped holes. And we actually don't have a print from the customer, but we basically we made an internal house print and we were going to check the location of the holes. And the driver goes, oh, should we check this on the CMM? It's like, no, this is a waste of the CMM. So like we walked over how to check position on the surface plate with a height gauge and some gauge pins. But I think more frequently, we're still using hard gauging, like pins, micrometers, calipers. Like we have every specialty mic under the sun now, apparently. Or we have like overflowing drawers of like strange blade mics and things. But like
Right.
CMMs are amazing. And I would not run a shop without one anymore. But I don't think it's like a necessary tool that you can't make parts without.
Right.
And so I guess I would maybe put that in that category, but I guess a more a slightly less serious answer kind of thing or whatever is the Dosatron that we bought.
Finally.
Yeah.
I'm so happy you finally got one.
Well, the big push for us, like the reason I didn't have a Dosatron for so long is because I had two Speedios and like, what, you got to put one bucket of coolant in there every once in a while? I was like, all right, well, I'm not going to buy this like $1,200 item just to like fill a Speedio. But now that we have two lathes burning coolant like nobody's business, it's been amazing to have the Dosatron. But like, I still don't know if like $1,200 is like actually pencils out.
It's not only pricey, but like you get it and you're like, really, this lightweight plastic POS is $1,200?
Well, and it's not even accurate.
Oh, really? I mean, ours is like fairly accurate. It's accurate enough that
ours
I
is
don't
like
care.
2% off.
Oh, wow. That's
I think
significant, actually. Yeah.
And we're
I
like
would
feeding
love,
it the recommended like gallons per minute and everything. And like the whole point of the Dosatron is it's not supposed to matter how much your pressure is or anything.
Right.
But like, yeah, ours is like 2% off. It doesn't really matter. We just like have it set at like 4% and we get like 2% coolant. But like,
that's bizarre.
It's a little bizarre. So like, I don't know if that one pencils out on paper of like, is this actually worth the $1,200 that I spent on? But man, it's so nice to just have a garden hose with full pressure coolant as if it's just coming out of a normal garden hose.
Yeah. And you just like, all right, great. Don't have to worry about it again. Yeah. I think back, 6 years and I was dumping concentrate into a 5-gallon bucket and then water and then using a paint mixer on a drill attachment and mixing it that way. And I'm like, oh man, we've come a long way.
5 years ago, that was like 6 months ago for me.
Yeah, so you know the pain. It's not fun, not at all. All right, I've got one tip or trick. This one is maybe, so it's funny. Usually when Chris and I do this, Chris goes very high level esoteric, and then I do kind of more of a practical one. But I've got one that has come up this week, in the last 2 weeks, a couple times, and that is, I mean, I guess it just kind of boils down to like, if you see something, say something. Like I've had multiple parts from multiple different customers come to me with very glaring issues and brought it up with them and they had no idea. Like they're like, oh my God, thank you so much. Like I can't believe you said, thank you for letting us know. And I think that most or a lot of shops that I've worked in and that I've talked to, just they're like, oh, if you want to do something stupid, I'll just do it. Like, that's fine.
Yeah, I guess I will go for a very strange one that we figured out like 6 months ago or whatever. We struggled with cardboard in the shop because we don't have a dumpster and we don't have space in our parking lot for a dumpster. So we would just get boxes and boxes and boxes from our vendors, and then we would just have nowhere to put them. And we spent so much time just like cutting it up into little bits and sticking it in the recycling can to get taken out, or we'd like bundle it all up, stick it in the back of the Prius and take it to the dump kind of thing or whatever. And so like we spent a lot of time doing that. And something we figured out is if you just buy like an industrial paper shredder, you get kind of like a 2-for-1 combo. You shred all of our cardboard that comes in. It just, an industrial paper shredder eats it like candy. And even like triple ply cardboard will just feed right through it.
Oh, wow.
I think it's just geared down to the point where it could eat anything.
Right.
And it's a dual purpose because what we then tested, we were like, we used to use like crinkled packaging paper and we've tried bubble wrap in the past. The cardboard shreds are like by far the most protective and most annoying packaging method. When our customers open the box, like I've had a couple customers, like I know Juan is one of our customers from Jack's Precision. He's complained a couple times about the cardboard shreds. And the funniest part about it is every time I'm like, well, did your parts show up safely? He's like, yeah, this is really good packaging. And I was like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you've just made like worse packing peanuts or like more annoying packing peanuts.
They're more annoying, but better because first off, you can just, they don't float around at least. But
Yeah,
they're
they're
also
not
like, they
sticking
pack
to everything.
super densely. So when we are like standard, we have really good packaging. I will say that. Like I'm not gonna beat around that bush. We have very good packaging, and I'll brag about that because what we do is we double box everything. So every part goes into like a foam sleeve, like from Uline calls them I think lens pouches. Every part goes into one of those, gets a sticker on it, and then gets bagged. And like heat seal bagged or Ziploc bagged. And then that goes into another box and that box goes into another box. So we just like Russian nesting all our parts.
Right.
And like, it's an annoying packaging process, but like when we're on a tight deadline to get a very precise part out the door to a customer across the country, I'd rather them be slightly annoyed opening the box because it's packed too well than them open the box and find a part with dents. And like the cardboard shreds pack so densely around the parts that like there's just no ability for them to move at all. And so like we just don't have any problems with it. And we're killing two birds with one stone by just getting rid of all our cardboard kind of thing.
Yeah, I love that. No, you guys, every time I've gone to your shop, I've been really impressed with your not only packaging station, but the way you guys handle parts. It's really impressive. All right, last up, what have you been researching this week?
Two non-shop related things, actually. One, cars, to buy a new car.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
And two, looking for another apartment.
Oh, really?
To just figuring out where to move. My current landlord just sold my apartment to somebody, and my apartment's like a little bit too small, and just trying to figure out where to move that's in the general area of where I want to move the shop to, because I don't know where the shop's moving to yet. So,
right. Dude, what is it with you and landlords just screwing you this year?
I don't know. On some level for my business landlord, like they're so amazing that like I can't even really fault them. They're in like a really tough situation with another tenant of the building. And I think they're just trying to figure out how to get out without getting screwed themselves. And so like I think it's tough on their end, and they're just amazing landlords, and they've been big supporters of Moria the whole time it's been a thing. So like I can't fault them too much, and it does suck that we're effectively getting screwed, but I don't think it's necessarily them directly screwing us.
It's okay. I'll fault them for you. This shit sucks.
What about you?
I was just looking through my history because I really haven't been researching that much. Obviously, I'm like kind of in the middle of learning Hypermill, and so it's been a lot of that. a lot of like, I guess the real random one that I'm seeing in my history is I was looking up daffodils because my wife brought some home and I was like, those smell like shit. And then it turns out that daffodils have like a chemical composition in there that is very similar or like can resemble like cat urine or feces.
Interesting.
And I was like,
That's
all right, I'm not
fascinating.
losing my mind then. That's good. Because they were like on our table and I'm sitting there eating dinner and then like I would catch whiffs of it. I'm like, ugh, like, is the food spoiled? Like, what is going on? And then, yeah, I looked it up and I was like, oh, okay, I'm not actually losing my mind. That's good.
Yeah, that's actually kind of cool.
Yeah.
I did not know that about daffodils.
I didn't either. All right, man. Well, thank you so much for joining me. It has been far too long. We'll have to do this, sooner than a year and a half. And yeah, just thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
And then thanks to new Patreon member Tim. And thanks to all the Patreon members. You guys let me send people like Easton a headset and microphone so you guys get good audio. Thank you all for listening, and I will be back next week.